Morning, seniors. Ah. Okay, so this is Thursday's reading, and then you'll have a discussion board today as well. You guys are doing awesome with the discussion boards. I really appreciate it. I know this is kind of a crazy time, and I understand that for you guys, this is just a bummer. And I know I can't make it better, but I miss you guys a lot, and I miss our time in class together. Um, but I know you're bummed. And I love you guys because you've gotten this far and you're ready to graduate, and I know things are just kind of up in the air. But as much as I can, I want to make this experience fun. So we are going to be reading today Glass Castle. We're almost done with it. It is so good. We got to figure out what we're going to do if um, after spring break we're out a little longer. I have plans and stuff, but I would love to be able to watch the movie with you. That's like a huge thing for me. So um, I'm trying to figure that out now, but we are at 272. I'm going to read to you about Jeanette's life with Eric and about Dad and all that good stuff. So, and I'll probably cry, so you know how that goes. So, we're going to read 272 to 281 today. My life with Eric was calm and predictable. I liked it that way, and for 4 years after I moved into his apartment, we got married. Shortly after the wedding, Mom's brother, my Uncle Jim, died in Arizona. Mom came to the apartment to give me the news and ask for a favor. "We need to buy Jim's land," she said. Mom and her brother had each inherited half of the West Texas land that had been owned by their father. The whole time we kids were growing up, Mom had been mysteriously vague about how big and how valuable this land was. But I had the impression that it was a few hundred acres, more or less, uninhabited desert, miles from any road. "We need to keep the land in the family," Mom told me. "It's important for sentimental reasons." "Let's see if we can buy it then," I said. "How much will it cost?" "You can borrow the money from Eric now that he's your husband," Mom said. "I've got a little money," I said. "How much will it cost?" I'd read somewhere that off-road land in parched West Texas sold for as little as $100 an acre. "You can borrow from Eric," Mom said again. "Well, how much?" $1 million. "What?" $1 million. "But Uncle Jim's land is the same size as your land," I said. I was slowly speaking because I wanted to make sure I understood the implications of what Mom had just told me. "You each inherited half of Grandpa Smith's land." "More or less," Mom said. "So if Uncle Jim's land is worth $1 million, that means your land is worth $1 million?" "Oh, I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? It's the same size as his." "I don't know how much it's worth because I never had it appraised. I was never going to sell it. My father taught me you never sell land. That's why we have to buy Uncle Jim's land. We have to keep it in the family." "You mean you own land worth $1 million?" I was thunderstruck. All those years in Welch with no food, no coal, no plumbing, and Mom had been sitting on land worth $1 million. Had all those years, as well as Mom and Dad's time on the street, not to mention their current life in an abandoned tenement, been a caprice inflicted on us by Mom? Could she have solved our financial problems by selling this land she never even saw? But she avoided my questions, and it became clear that to Mom, holding on to this land was not so much an investment strategy as it was an article of faith, a revealed truth as deeply felt and contestable to her Catholicism. As for the life of me, I could not get her to tell me how much the land was worth. "I told you I don't know," she said. "Then tell me how many acres it is and where exactly it is, and I'll find out how much an acre of land is going for in that area." I wasn't interested in her money. I just wanted to know. I needed to know the answer to my question. How much was that freaking land worth? Maybe she truly didn't know. Maybe she was afraid to find out. Maybe she was afraid of what we would think if we knew. But instead of answering me, she kept repeating that it was important to keep Uncle Jim's land, land that had belonged to her father and her father's father and her father before that, in the family. "Mom, I cannot ask Eric for $1 million. Jeanette, I have not asked you for a favor, but I'm asking you for one right now. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't important, and this is important. I told Mom I didn't think Eric would lend me $1 million to buy some land in Texas, and even if he would, I wouldn't borrow it from him. It's too much money, I said. What would I do with the land? Keep it in the family. I can't believe you're asking me for this, I said. I've never seen the land. Jeanette, Mom said when she had accepted the fact that she would not get her way. I am deeply disappointed in you. A couple of you guys in fourth hour guessed $1 million, and I wanted every time to be like, yeah, it was $1 million, but I couldn't. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? I mean, yeah, listen, my husband's family, they have farmland, and Grandpa worked so hard for it, and I would never consider selling it. But, when Rosemary says she's saving all of these things for a rainy day, and then Jeanette says, it's pouring, and she says, it's only a sprinkle. Like, what is pouring to Rosemary? What is pouring? And that just teaches us what she values as a person. She doesn't value shelter in place. She doesn't value food. She values individuality, right? Because of her art, her individuality she values, and she values family. But sometimes you also have to value survival and comfortability, which these kids never had. So it just blows my mind, and I am sad that I could not read this to you. I could not read this to you in class and see your reaction. It blows my mind. But I know you're reacting right now, and you're freaking out just like me. I love it. 274. Lori was working as a freelance artist specializing in fantasy, illustrating calendars and game boards and book jackets. Brian had joined the police force as soon as he turned 20. Dad couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong, raising a son who'd grown up to become a member of the Gestapo. But I was proud of my brother on the day he was sworn in, standing there in the ranks of new officers, straight-shouldered in his navy blue uniform with its glittering brass buttons. Meanwhile, Lori graduated from high school and enrolled in one of the city colleges, but she never really applied herself and ended up living with Mom and Dad. She worked from time to time as a bartender and a waitress, but the jobs never lasted long. Ever since she was a kid, she'd been looking for someone to take care of her. In Welch, the Pentecostal neighbors provided for her, and now in New York, with her long blonde hair and her wide blue eyes, she found various men who were willing to help her out. The boyfriends never lasted longer than the jobs. She talked about finishing college and going off to law school, but distractions kept cropping up. The longer she stayed with Mom and Dad, the more lost she became. And after a while, she was spending most of her days in an apartment, smoking cigarettes, reading novels, and occasionally painting nude self-portraits. That two-room squat was cramped, and Maureen and Dad got into the worst screaming fights, and with Maureen calling Dad a worthless drunk, and Dad calling Maureen a sick puppy, the rut of the litter who should have been drowned at birth. Maureen even stopped reading and slept all day, leaving the apartment only to buy cigarettes. I called and persuaded her to come see me and discuss her future. When she arrived, I scarcely recognized her. She had bleached her hair and her eyebrows were platinum, and she was wearing dark makeup as thick as a Kubi dancer. She lit one cigarette after another and kept glancing around the room. When I brought up some career possibilities, she told me that the only thing she wanted to do was help fight the Mormon cults that had kidnapped thousands of people in Utah. What cults? I asked. Don't pretend you don't know, she said. That just means you're one of them. Afterward, I called Brian. Do you think Maureen's on drugs? I asked. If she's not, she should be, he said. She's gone nuts. I told Mom that Maureen should get professional help, but Mom kept insisting that all Maureen needed was fresh air and sunshine. I talked to several doctors, but they told me that it sounded like Maureen would refuse to get help on her own. She could be treated only on the order of the court if she proved she was danger to herself and others. 6 months later, Maureen stabbed Mom. Right? It happened after Mom decided it was time for Maureen to develop a little self sufficiency by moving out and finding a place of her own. God knows, God help those who help themselves, Mom told Maureen, and so, for her own good, she would have to leave the nest and make her way to the world. Maureen couldn't bear the idea of her own mother kicking her out onto the streets, and she snapped. Mom insisted Maureen had not actually been trying to kill her, she'd just become confused and upset, she said, but the wounds required stitches, and the police arrested Maureen. She was arraigned a few days later. Mom and Dad and Lori and Brian and I were all there. Brian was fuming. Lori looked grief-stricken. Dad was half-potted and kept trying to pick fights with the security guards, but Mom acted like her normal self, nonchalant in the face of adversary. As we sat waiting on the courtroom benches, she hummed tunelessly and sketched the other spectators. Maureen shuffled into the courtroom, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her face was puffy and she looked dazed, but when she saw us, she smiled and waved. Her lawyer asked the judge to set bail. I had borrowed several $1,000s from Eric and had the cash in my purse. But after listening to the prosecutor's version of events, the judge shook her head grimly. Bail's denied. In the hallway, Lori and Dad got into a loud argument over who was responsible for pushing Maureen over the edge. Lori blamed Dad for his creating a sick environment, while Dad maintained that Maureen had faulty wiring. Mom chimed in that all the junk food Maureen ate had led to a chemical imbalance, and Brian started yelling at them to shut the hell up or he'd arrest them all. I just stood there looking from one distorted face to another, listening to this babbling of enraged squabblers of our members of the Walls family. I just stood there looking from one distorted face to another, listening to this babble of enraged squabbling as the members of the Walls family gave vent to all of their years of hurt and anger, each unloading his or her own accumulated grievances and blaming the others for allowing the most fragile of us to break into pieces. That is poetic. Whoo! The most fragile of them, Maureen. The judge sent Maureen to an upstate hospital. She was released after a year and immediately bought a one-way ticket to California. I told Brian that we had to stop her. She didn't know a single person in California. How would she survive? But Brian thought it was the smartest thing she could have done for herself. He said she needed to get as far away from Mom and Dad and probably the rest of us as possible. I decided that Brian was right. But I also hoped that Maureen had chosen California because she thought it was her true home, the place where she really belonged, where it was always warm and you could dance in the rain, pick grapes off the vines, and sleep outside at night under the stars. Maureen did not want any of us to see her off. I rose just after first light in the morning. She was scheduled to leave. It was an early departure, and I wanted to be awake and thinking of her at the moment her bus pulled out, so I could say farewell in my mind. I went to the window and looked at the cold, wet sky. I wondered if she was thinking of us and if she was going to miss us. I'd always had mixed feelings about bringing her to New York, but I'd agreed to let her come. Once she arrived, I'd been too busy taking care of myself to look after her. I'm sorry, Maureen, I said when the time came. I'm sorry for everything. Oh, Maureen. I say, she was the one that was kind of like babied. Wasn't she, Bandit? She was babied. Wasn't she? Oh. That's right. I'm almost done, okay?
It's okay, bud.
It's okay. All right, one more. Special guest, Bandit and Jacob. Dang, looking cute. Okay. I'm going to cry probably, Jacob.
Why?
You going to be okay? Because this is a sad part of the book.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. After that, I hardly ever saw Mom and Dad. Neither did Brian. He had gotten married and bought a rundown Victorian house on Long Island that he restored, and he and his wife had a child, a little girl. They were his family now. Lori, who was still living in her apartment near the Port Authority, was more in touch with Mom and Dad, but she, too, had gone her own way. We hadn't gotten together since Maureen's arraignment. Something in all of us broke that day, and afterward, we no longer had the spirit for family gatherings. About a year after Maureen took off for California, I got a call at work from Dad. He said he needed to get together to discuss something important. Can't we do it over the phone? I need to see you in person, honey. Dad asked me to come down to the Lower East Side that evening. If it ain't too much trouble, he added, could you stop on your way and pick me up a bottle of vodka? Oh, so that's what this is about. No, honey, I need to talk to you. But I'd appreciate some vodka. Nothing fancy, just the cheapest rot gut they have. A pint would be fine. A fifth would be great. I was annoyed by Dad's sly request for vodka, tossing it out at the end of the conversation as if it was an afterthought. When I figured it was probably the purpose of the call, that afternoon I called Mom, who still never drank anything stronger than tea, and asked if I should indulge Dad. Your father is who he is, Mom said. It's a little late in the game to try to reform him now. Humor the man. That night I stopped in the liquor store and bought a half a gallon of the cheapest rut gut on the shelf, just as Dad had requested, and then I took a taxi down to the Lower East Side. I climbed the dark staircase and pushed open the unlocked door. Mom and Dad were lying on the bed under a pile of thin blankets. I got the impression they had been there all day. Mom squealed when she saw me, and Dad started apologizing about the mess, saying if Mom would have let him clear out some of her crap, they might at least be able to swing a cat in here, which got Mom accusing Dad of being a bum. Good to see you, I said as I kissed them. It's been a while. Mom and Dad struggled up into the sitting position. I saw Dad eyeing the brown paper bag, and I passed it to him. A Magnum, he said, his voice choked with gratitude as he eased the big bottle from the bag. He unscrewed the cap and took a long, deep pull. Thank you, my darling, he said. You were so good to your old man. Mom wore a heavy cable knit sweater. The skin of her hands were deeply cracked and her hair was tangled. But her face had a healthy pink glow and her eyes were clear and bright. Beside her, Dad looked gaunt. His hair, still coal black except for the touches of gray at his temple, was combed back, but his cheeks were sunken, and he had a thin beard. He'd always been clean-shaven, even during those days on the streets. Why are you growing a beard, Dad? I asked. Every man should grow one once. But why now? It's now or never, Dad said. Fact is, I'm dying. I laughed nervously, then looked at Mom, who had reached for her sketch pad without saying anything. Dad was watching me carefully. He passed me the vodka bottle. Although I almost never drank, I took a sip and felt the burn of the liquor slide down my throat. This stuff could grow on you, I said. Don't let it, Dad said. He started telling me about how he had acquired a rare tropical disease after getting into a bloody fistfight with some Nigerian drug dealers. The doctor had examined him, pronounced the rare disease incurable, and told him he had anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to live. It was a ridiculous yarn. The fact was, although Dad was only 59, he had been smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day since he was 13. And by the time he was also putting away a good quart of booze daily, he was, as he put it many times, completely pickled. But despite all the hell-raising and destruction and chaos he had created in our lives, I couldn't imagine what my life would have been like, what the world would have been like without him. As awful as he could be, I always knew he loved me in a way no one else ever had. I looked out the window. Now, no slut singing or slinging or boo-hooing about poor old Rex, Dad said. I don't want any of it, either now or when I'm gone. I nodded. But you always loved your old man, didn't you? I did, Dad, I said. And you loved me. Now that's the God's honest truth, Dad chuckled. We had some times, didn't we? We did. Never did build that glass castle. No, but we had fun planning it. Those were some damn fine plans. Mom stayed out of the conversation, sketching quietly. Dad, I said, I'm sorry. I really should have asked you to my graduation. To hell with that, he laughed. Ceremonies never did mean diddly to me. He took another long pull of the Magnum. I got a lot of regret about my life, he said. But I'm damn proud of you, Mountain Goat. the way you turned out. Whenever I'm asked about you, I figure I must have done something right. Of course you did. Well, all right then. We talked about the old days some, and finally it was time to go. I kissed them both, and at the door I turned to look at Dad one more time. I can't see without my glasses. Okay, I'm back. Hey, he said. He winked and pointed his finger at me. Have I ever let you down? He started chuckling because he knew there was only one way I could ever answer that question. I just smiled and then I closed the door. 2 weeks later, Dad had a heart attack. When I got to the hospital, he was in the bed in the emergency room. His eyes were closed. Mom and Lori were standing next to him. It's just the machines keeping him alive at this point, Mom said. I knew Dad would have hated that, spending his final moments in a hospital hooked up to machines. He had wanted to be out in the wild somewhere. He always said that when he died, we should put him on a mountaintop and let the buzzards and the coyotes tear his body apart. I had this crazy urge to swoop him up in my arms and charge through the doors to check out Rex Walls style one last time. So I took his hand. It was warm and heavy. An hour later, they turned off the machines. In the months that followed, I found myself always wanting to be somewhere other than where I was. If I was at work, I wished I were at home. If I was at the apartment, I couldn't wait to get out. If a taxi I'd hailed was stuck in traffic for over a minute, I got out and walked. I felt best when I was on the move, going someplace rather than being there. I took up ice skating. I rose early in the morning and made my way through the quiet, dawn-lit streets to the rink, where I laced up my skates so tight my feet throbbed. I welcomed the numbing cold and even the jolt of my falls on the hard, wet ice. The fast-paced, repetitive maneuvers distracted me, and sometimes I went back at night to skate again, returning home only when it was late and when I was exhausted. It took me a while to realize that just being on the move wasn't enough, that I needed to reconsider everything. A year after Dad died, I left Eric. He was a good man, but not the right one for me, and Park Avenue was not where I belonged. I took a small apartment in the west side. It had neither a doorman nor a fireplace, but there were large windows that flooded the rooms with light and croquette floors and a small foyer, just like that first apartment Lori and I had found in the Bronx. It felt right. I went ice skating less often, and when my skates were stolen, I never replaced them. My compulsion to always be on the move began to fade. But I liked to go for long walks at night. I often walked west towards the river. The city lights obscured the stars, but on clear nights I could see Venus on the horizon, up over the dark water, glowing steadily. So we just have one more section left tomorrow. That's such a hard bit to read, and I hope that you guys were able to read it with me and listen to it and feel it and understand her struggles to just try to find out who she is, and go back to her roots. And it took her dad dying to kind of get there. So we'll continue tomorrow. I miss you guys. If you need anything, please, please, please email me. I know I look a hot mess, but I'm doing okay. Jacob says hi. This is my little Jacob. I love you guys, and I will see you soon.